welcome to a new video. Here we're looking at a new lens, and I just want to talk to you about it briefly, tell you about what we've got on the lens, and hopefully this will be informative. So this is the Canon EFS 18-135mm crop sensor lens designed for APS-C side censored cameras. So basically your 7Ds, your 7D Mark II, 90D, 70Ds, 80Ds, your Rebels. This is designed for those particular cameras. Now what's unique about this particular lens, it has a Nano USM motor, which means it should autofocus a lot quieter than your standard USM motors, but it is quicker than your STM stepping motors lenses. So it's like the best of both worlds, quieter but retains the speed. It's got image stabilization. It's 18mm to 135mm. Has image stabilizer switch on and off, and it has autofocus and manual focus switch there as well. It has a lock button. Really, when you get short lenses like this, I don't really see their need for these lock buttons because they don't really creep. They're not really big enough for that. But there is a lock switch there if you wish to lock it. And on this lens you can attach a zooming attachment that allows you to zoom the lens smoothly in video. So that should allow you to have some nice focus pulls as well as some nice zooming action. Taking the lens cap off, I can tell you that the aperture range on this is 3.5 to 5.6, and obviously it's an EFS lens. The front filter size is 67mm, so if you want to attach any sort of filters on there, that's the filter size you will need. And it's an extremely nice and versatile lens. Its minimum focus is 0.39 meters, and holding this in the hand, it feels solid and feels durable, and I do think you would not be disappointed with this. But we're going to take a quick closer look at this lens, see how it performs, and look at some image quality. Obviously I can tell you the lens is not weather sealed, so that's something you need to take into account. So we've got a metal mount on the back. Nice to see it's not plastic. And obviously there's a plastic raised piece of plastic on here that is there to prevent you putting it onto full frame cameras and risk damaging your mirror if you're using this on any of the digital SLRs. Obviously this is designed for digital SLRs, but you can adapt this using the EFS and EF adapter for mirrorless cameras, so you can use this on mirrorless. Just remember, when you do so, it will go into crop mode, and obviously you will lose some of your megapixels because of that fact. Its minimum focus is 0.39 meters, and in hand it does feel well compact and well solid. So what we need to do now is have a look at this lens in more detail and have a look at how it performs. But you know, it's got a nice metal mount on there, and I think anyone putting this on your lens would feel you've got a good quality piece of glass on the front of your camera instead of using your kit lens. This is certainly a lot better and a lot sharper. So the next stage of the video is we're going to have a look at image quality, so I'll see you in the next segment. So we're just going to check a few images out on the 18-135 EFS Nano USM lens for APS-C crop sensor cameras. We're on the 90D. This is at 18mm and f3.5. So let's just have a look and see how the image is reproduced at that aperture. So I'd like to go into the center and have a look, see how we're doing. Not too shabby. It is a little bit soft, if I'm honest with you. Looking in the corners, it's reasonably okay. Not fantastic, obviously a little bit of softness. And I don't see much chromatic aberration though in the windows, which is a good plus. So let's have a look at the next image. So this is at f5, so have a look in the centre, see how we're doing with the window. Reasonably good detail. It's still not fantastically sharp, so have a look in the window, see if we've got any sort of chromatic aberration. I don't see much there. It looks good, no major problems here. You've got to remember this lens is a high quality lens, so it's going to give you good results. And looking in the corner here, it looks okay. It's not super sharp, obviously. It's not going to be that sharp at those sort of apertures. So let's have a look at f5.6. We should have a slight improvement. Having a look in the centre again. We seem to have some improvement there. I think we've got some improvement, definitely. Having a look at the corners. I don't see any sort of chromatic aberration really. If we look at these windows, I don't see any greens or magenta there, so it looks really good in terms of chromatic aberration, controlling that chromatic aberration. Have a look at the corner down here, and it looks reasonable there as well. So let's have a look at f8 at 18mm, see if we've got some improvement in the centre, which I do think we have, definitely. Yeah, it's a lot better. As you can see there, a lot better. So have a look in the windows. Any chromatic aberration that I can tell? Not really. Looks okay. Let's go down to the bottom. See how we're doing here in the foreground in terms of sharpness, and we've got good sharpness. So let's have a look at f16 at 18mm. We should have some improvement here because this lens is designed for APS-C. We shouldn't really have much of an issue with any diffraction. That would be softness in that image. So let's just have a look again. It seems a little bit softer than it was at f8. Let's just go back to where we was. This is at f8 and this is at f16. So it seems to be a little bit worse than it was at f8 in terms of softness, but we still are getting good detail. So let's jump to 50mm here. This is 50mm. One thing I have noticed in the images, we are getting a little bit of vignetting at the wide 18mm. So just keep that in mind, that there will be a slight amount of vignetting, but that's to be expected. So at f5 it's giving us some good centre detail, and I do think it's quite sharp there. If we look at that, it looks really nice there. I think this lens is behaving a tad better at 50mm. So let's have a look at 5.6, see how that looks in the centre. That's where we want to be, focusing the majority of our attention. So let's have a look. Again, we're getting good detail. Let's have a look at f8. Getting good detail in the corners, so I do like that. So let's just zoom into the centre again. That's 66%. Again, it looks pretty nice. And this lens is a quality lens. It's not a cheap lens. And if you have a look at the detail in the stonework, it's giving us good results at 66%. So have a look at the next image, which is going to be at f16, I believe. So let's just zoom in there again at 66%. I think we're getting good results there. So let's just go back to F5. There we are. Let's have a look at how it is at f5.6. Have a look at f8. Slight amount of detail increase at f8, and f16. Again, good detail. So I like that. No problems there with this lens at all. I really like it. It's giving us some really good results. So let's have a look at 135mm on this lens at f5.6. So this is what it looks like at f5.6. I do think the corners don't look as punchy as they should be. At at f5.6, but let's see how it improves at f8. So this is f8. We have a bit of improvement in the image quality. Let's just have a look at the next image, which is f16, and it does seem to be a slight improvement. But while we're here at 135mm, let's just zoom into the center here at 50%, and let's have a look at the same image at f8 at 50%, same image at 50% at f16. So that's f5.6, giving us some good sharpness, good detail. I like it. Let's have a look at f8. There seems to be minor improvement in quality, but it's still giving us good results, this lens is. And let's have a f16, see if we get any sort of diffraction coming in there. And I don't think we are. I think we're okay at f16. So it's just a quick roundup of image quality, and I think this lens is fantastic in quality. There's very little distortion that I can see going off in terms of pincushion distortion or barrel distortion for wide angle shots. So I think anyone would be really happy with this lens. I would highly recommend this lens. So we're just testing the image stabilization on the Nano USM 18-135 lens. So we don't have stabilization on at the moment. Let's just turn it on. Let's see how it does. So it's doing a good job, giving us good stabilization. Let's just pan around, see how it does as we're moving. It gives us a relatively stable shot, as you can see in the viewfinder on the 90D. But let's just walk around a little bit. Stabilization is doing a good job. Let's pull it back to 50mm. So this is giving you equivalent view that you would have as a person doing some candid photography, walking around with the lens. Let's just see how we're doing walking around. Obviously it's not perfectly stable, but it's giving us good results. I'm just trying to have an idea of how stable the shot can be while walking. So that gives you a good idea on how good the stabilization is at 50mm. So that's how good the stabilization is. Let's put that to 135mm. Let's see how it does. Stabilization seems relatively stable and good and quite smooth. Let's move it over to the statue. It's doing a good job, as you can see. Let's just walk a little bit, see if we're able to keep it steady at all. It's still doing quite a reasonable job, considering it has no sensor stabilization, because this is just lens stabilization on the 90D APS-C camera. We're just testing the flaring capabilities of the lens to see how it does in bright light. Okay, we've got 3 images here to have a look at. You know, on the 18-135 Nano USM lens. In terms of distortion, I want to have a look. A good idea of finding out if you've got distortion is just take a picture of a brick wall or a stone wall that generally is quite straight, and it will give you an idea of how much distortion you can expect, such as pincushion distortion, which is at the zoom end, and barrel distortion at the wide end. So looking at this image that we've got at f8, which is reproducing some good detail, I can clearly see we've got quite a decent amount of barrel distortion which is appearing here. As you can see, it's curved, So as we can detect from this particular lens that we are experiencing quite a significant amount of barrel distortion at 18mm. Well, let's have a look at how the lens improves at 50mm. So let's have a look. So 50mm, having a look at that, we seem to have eliminated our barrel distortion, and I do not really detect any sort of pincushion distortion that would be affected by the zoom. So, you know, your pincushion distortion, typically you'd expect something to curve that way, and barrel distortion you expect it to curve around that way. So obviously you can see here the lines look pretty much straight, so I don't think we're suffering from any sort of distortion at this moment in time, and this is a good idea if you do want to test out your lenses for any sort of distortion. Just take a picture of a brick or stone wall, which should be quite straight, and I don't think we're experiencing any sort of distortion at 50mm there. So let's have a look at 135mm to see how it's doing if we're gaining any sort of pincushion distortion, which we'd expect it to curve a little bit that way. Now, looking at these images, they look pretty much straight. I don't see any issues with pincushion distortion at all, and it looks relatively straight to my eye. So the lens does seem to suffer with a little bit of barrel distortion at the wide end, but as you zoom in, you don't seem to experience much of that. So that's good news for this lens. Great result. So you might want to consider zooming in a little bit more than you would normally, say at 18. So you might want to zoom in maybe to 24 or something like that. But other than that, I do think this lens is producing some good sharp results. And if we have a look at the image in more detail in the center, let's have a look at sharpness. We're rendering fantastic detail there at 135mm. If we go to 100%, you can see some good contrast, some good detail, and I do like it. If I look in the corner, see if it's giving us good detail. I do think so. These images are at f8, by the way, so these lenses should perform reasonably well, but you got to remember they're not L lenses. But looking at the detail that we're getting from this lens, it gives fantastic detail. So have a look at 50mm, see how it's doing if we zoom into the center at 100%. Again, it's giving us good detail, looks nice. I don't see any problems with that at all. It's giving us good contrast as well. Let's see how the corners are doing. A little bit softer at the far end of the corners on the 50mm, but it doesn't look too bad at all. I've seen a lot worse than this, and I would say you should be more than happy with the results from this lens. A little bit of softness in the corners, the extreme corners, but the rest here looks fantastic. So let's have a look at 18mm. As I can clearly see, we have barrel distortion there. You can clearly see it's quite obvious. So look in the corners, 200% there. Maybe we need to come out a little bit because that might be too challenging. But 100%, it's looking reasonably okay. There is some softness here, but it's not too dramatic. If we go further down here, it is rendering some good detail. Just so you know, ISO is around 500 for all images in this assessment of the quality of this lens, and it's producing some good results. So, you know, make up your own mind whether you think it's a good lens, but looking in the center here, we've got some good sharpness even at 18mm. It's just unfortunate, even here you can see the barrel distortion. We zoomed in a little bit here at 100%. You can see there is a curvature there. So it does suffer with barrel distortion at 18mm. But all in all, it's a good lens. You know, you'll pick these up for around 350 to 450 quid. And yeah, and they're not L lenses, you know. Clearly they're not going to be as optically perfect as L lenses are, but nevertheless it's a highly recommended lens.